Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Zona Merah. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins in a remote town at the foot of a mountain in Indonesia, where the town mayor was proudly boasting about his accomplishments to a group of reporters. He had built a rehabilitation center that took in many homeless people and elderly residents with no family. The mayor was preparing to run for a seat in parliament next year and planned to appoint his son as the next mayor. But the reality was far from the image he painted. At one of the timber mills under his control, workers were on strike. They hadn't been paid for 2 months. The mustached supervisor promised once again that all wages would be paid once the next shipment was delivered tomorrow. Maya, a female repair worker in the front row, had no choice but to accept it. She couldn't afford to lose her job, not when she had a younger brother to support. Tuition, rent, and living expenses were already weighing her down. Maya's brother, Addy, was growing restless. He believed there was no future for them in the town since all the industries were controlled by the corrupt mayor. After a heated argument with his sister, Addy decided to leave. He and his childhood friend bought long-distance bus tickets, planning to sneak away early the next morning to seek work in the big city. But they didn't realize someone was watching. A soldier's aide had been observing their every move. That night, a group of strangers cornered Addy and his friend in an alley. Addy tried to resist, but the two young men were no match for the large, muscular attackers. Before long, they were knocked out and dragged to a truck. Inside, they found themselves among other men, each wearing a red wristband. The truck eventually stopped at a logging camp deep in the mountains. Addy and the others were forced into wooden cages. At dawn, they were rudely awakened by the heel of a large boot. A bald man flexed his bald head before growling at them, saying this is where they'll work and live from now on. Addy's friend was still trying to figure out what was happening when a bearded man whose hair was transplanted to his chin stepped in to play the peacemaker. He explained this group specialized in capturing homeless men from the town and using them for illegal logging. The only way to survive was to keep their heads down and not cause trouble. It didn't take long for Addy and his friend to realize how harsh the conditions were. The other workers were malnourished and scarred from beatings, but despite the fear, Addy couldn't shake the thought of escaping. During a meal, he asked the bearded man if anyone had ever tried to run. The man replied that someone had, just 2 days ago. He climbed the fence while the guards were asleep. As if on cue, 2 workers suddenly made a run for it right in front of the guards, causing chaos. The bearded man seized the opportunity, tackling a guard to the ground, but not before taking a knife slash to the leg. Addy and his friend rushed to help, dragging him into the depths of the forest. The guards fired their guns but missed them as they slipped behind the trees. However, the bearded man's injury was severe, although his beard was spared. Blood was pouring from his wound and he was struggling to walk. That's when he spotted a bright red flower growing nearby, an unusual plant that his grandfather once said could heal any injury. He crushed the petals and pressed them to the wound. The pain was intense, making him cry out in a chicken voice. Addy quickly covered his smelly mouth, but it was too late. The guards heard the chicken scream, mistaking it for a real chicken. Unfortunately, Addy and his friend were captured and dragged back to the camp. His friend managed to escape into the woods but was shot in the stomach as he fled. Despite his injuries, he managed to evade the guards, but his wound wouldn't stop bleeding. He eventually collapsed and died to meet Satan. Back at the camp, Addy woke to the sound of the bearded man groaning. When Addy leaned closer, he saw that the wound had become infected and was now rotting. Suddenly, the man's body began to twitch violently. His eyes rolled back and he fell still. Panicked, Addy shouted for help. A guard stormed over, furious at the commotion. He kicked Addy hard before finally checking the bearded man's body. But as soon as the guard leaned down, the bearded man's eyes snapped open. With a guttural growl, he lunged forward and sank his teeth into the guard's greasy leg. The guard screamed and stomped on him repeatedly until he stopped moving. Only then did the guard regain his composure, but it was already too late. To punish Addy for causing trouble, the guard ordered him to dispose of the bearded man's body. A group of men soon arrived in a pickup truck, driving deep into the forest. They forced Addy at gunpoint to dig a hole, and he had no choice but to comply. By the time the sky began to lighten, Addy had finally finished burying the bearded man's body. But just as he was about to get back in the truck, he saw something horrifying. A hand emerging from the dirt, followed by a faint silhouette crawling out of the grave. The guards assumed Addy was acting up again and immediately pressed a knife to his throat. Meanwhile, Addy's sister Maya was on the verge of losing her mind. Her brother hadn't come home all night and he wasn't answering his phone. Just as she was frantically searching for him, she heard more bad news. A body had been found floating in the river. Maya ran to the scene as fast as she could, but the area was already cordoned off by the police. Sensing her desperation, a reporter showed her a photo of the body. Maya's heart nearly stopped, but it wasn't Addie. She breathed a deep sigh of relief and thanked the reporter profusely. After introducing himself as Rayson, a journalist from a neighboring city, he explained that he had originally come to town to interview the mayor. But after witnessing the mayor's smug and deceitful demeanor, Rayson confronted him, pointing out that his family had controlled the town for over 20 years. The mayor pretended to take it in stride, but ultimately refused the interview under various excuses. Having left empty-handed, Rayson had no choice but to wander the town, hoping to dig up another story. Before they parted ways, he handed Maya his business card, telling her to contact him if she discovered anything newsworthy. But Maya had no time for that. The factory had once again failed to pay the workers, and tensions were boiling over. The mayor's son had to personally step in to calm the situation, promising that wages would be paid first thing the next morning. But as soon as he turned his back, he cursed the factory manager, calling him useless. He ordered that only half the wages be paid, and if anyone caused trouble, they were to be dealt with. As expected, when the workers saw their wages were less than half of what they were owed, they erupted with rage. The senior repairwoman with curly hair, well respected among the workers, stepped in to calm them down, promising to lead the fight for fair pay. However, the factory manager's henchman witnessed the scene and interpreted it as her inciting rebellion. That night, as the repairwoman was heading home, they kidnapped her and threw her into a van. Maya wasn't paying attention to any of that. She was rushing to the hospital. A body had been found. It's Addie's friend. Since they had disappeared together, she feared the worst. She reported everything to the police, but they remained indifferent, showing no sense of urgency. Realizing she couldn't rely on them, she turned to Rayson for help. Rayson was already suspicious. 2 deaths in just a few days, both victims with gunshot wounds. When Maya handed him a photo of Addie and asked him to keep an eye out, he agreed, though he was already investigating. He had noticed that both of the deceased men were wearing red wristbands, identical to those worn by the residents of the mayor's care center, except for the color. Back at the logging camp deep in the mountains, Addie was rudely awakened by the boot of the guard captain. After yesterday's ordeal, Addie had learned to keep his head down, but he couldn't ignore the 2 new bodies loaded onto the truck. They were the 2 men who had led the escape attempt the day before. Still, something felt off. Addie noticed that the same guard who always gave him trouble seemed unsteady. His right pant leg was stained with dried blood. Addie clearly remembered that the bearded man had bitten the guard's greasy leg in that exact spot. His suspicion deepened when he saw the guard roll up his pant leg, revealing an angry, festering wound. Just then, several other guards rushed over, shouting that the bearded man's body had gone missing. Addie's eyes widened. His theory was becoming more plausible. He told them that the bearded man had turned into a zombie and escaped for its zombie life. The infected guard's face twisted with rage. Furious at being accused, he punched Addie in the face. Instead of breaking it up, the captain smirked and told them to settle it like men. Addie, already fed up with the guard's bullying, fought back with everything he had. The 2 men were evenly matched, but eventually, Addie was knocked unconscious. The captain, unimpressed with his henchman's performance, cursed at him and ordered the guards to drag Addie back to his cage. Late that night, Addie woke up in his cage, a heavy sense of dread settling in his chest. Across the camp, the infected guard's condition had worsened. His eyes were bloodshot, and his body was trembling violently. Noticing Addie watching him, the infected guard's fury flared. He stormed toward Addie, but another guard stepped in to stop him. The infected guard's rage twisted into something primal. With a guttural growl, he knocked the other guard unconscious and resumed his approach toward Addie. Addie suspected that the man was about to turn into a zombie. He screamed for help, his cries of terror echoing through the air. The other laborers in the cage panicked as well. Suddenly, the infected guard forcefully smashed open the wooden door, his blade cutting into one of them in a swift, deadly arc. The laborers were scared out of their wits, scrambling out of the wooden cage in chaos. The commotion quickly attracted the attention of other guards. When they saw the infected guard lying motionless on the ground for no apparent reason, one of the guards rushed over to check on him. Just then, the man's eyes snapped open, a ghastly, lifeless white, and he lunged at his colleague. He had fully turned into a zombie, attacking his closest target with terrifying instinct. The colleague he bit immediately convulsed and stood up, eyes rolled back, now a zombie himself. The laborers' survival instincts kicked in. They retreated back into the cage, realizing it was now the safest place to be. Addie, watching helplessly from the side, was frantic. He tried to stop the guards from rushing in, but they ignored him, and he could only watch as they were bitten one by one. Fortunately, there were enough guards, and even though gunfire was barely effective, they managed to subdue the crazed zombies through coordinated effort. Addy himself managed to take down 2 zombies in quick succession. Maybe it was the protagonist's luck, but the effort left him exhausted, and he eventually passed out. When Addy came to, the chaos in the village had been quelled. The guard captain, recalling Addy's warning from the day before, decided to press him for more information, but Addy only knew so much. From the previous day's battle, however, he had discovered that the zombie's weak point was the head. Another critical detail was the incubation period. The infected guard had been bitten on the leg and took a whole day to turn, but those bitten on the neck transformed almost instantly. 10 guards had died in the previous day's conflict. The sub-leader knew this was too big to cover up, so he reported everything to the mayor. To Addy's surprise, the illegal logging operation they were guarding was secretly run by the mayor himself. When the mayor heard about the zombie outbreak, he arrived immediately. Testing his theory, he shot one of the zombies in the head, and sure enough, it matched the rumors. Gravely serious, he ordered the captain to keep everything under wraps. Under no circumstances could news of this spread beyond the village, and the virus absolutely couldn't be allowed to escape into the outside world. What the mayor didn't realize was that the virus had already spread. The first recorded case, the bearded man infected from beneath the earth, had already begun to wreak havoc. A mother and daughter had crossed paths with the infected man. The driver, caught off guard, was tackled to the ground. In a panic, the mother ignored her daughter Ella's desperate pleas to stay back and rushed to help, only to be bitten herself moments later. The driver managed to escape, abandoning the expensive Tesla car without a second thought. The girl opened the door to check on her mother, only to see the zombie coming straight at her. Thinking quickly, Ella kicked out with her long legs, pinned the zombie's strong muscles against the door, and slipped out through the opposite side. She circled the car and managed to trap the zombie inside, thinking that the Tesla must be zombie-proof. There was no time to check on her mother's injuries. Ella dragged her into the woods and ran. But as they made their way through the trees, Ella began to sense something was wrong. Her mother's body started trembling uncontrollably. The next moment, her mother's eyes flew open, blank and white, and with a guttural scream, she lunged at Ella. Ella screamed and pushed her mother away, stumbling backward in terror. Her mother, now fully turned, charged at her with Tesla speed, but before she could reach Ella, her head slammed into a tree trunk with a sickening crunch. Ella collapsed to the ground in shock, unaware that the zombie trapped in the zombie-proof Tesla had already broken through the window and was closing in fast. Before long, the bearded zombie followed the scent to a mountain village. The unsuspecting villagers had no chance to defend themselves. One after another, they were turned into zombies. Meanwhile, Ella spent the whole day recovering. Finally accepting her mother's death, she buried her with a heavy heart. Then, steeling herself, she set off down the mountain, calling for help. As the sun rose, Ella reached the mountain village, only to find it overrun with zombies. But she showed no fear, no hesitation. She picked up a hoe from the ground and started swinging. Zombies surged toward her from both sides, and her hands trembled as she hacked her way through them. Reaching a bend in the road, she darted into a chicken coop. The overwhelming stench masked her scent, and Ella cowered, trembling like a little chicken. Then, from a distance, she heard cries for help. The sound drew the zombies away, giving her a narrow window of escape. There was no doubt about it. The village was lost. And yet the mayor was still congratulating himself for containing the outbreak, praising his men for their swift response. But Addy, who had witnessed everything, knew it wasn't over. The zombie crisis was only beginning. Meanwhile, the laborers in the cage gathered around, desperate to know the source of the zombie outbreak. None of them noticed the person in the corner, the one whose arm was still bleeding. As evening fell, a mournful howl suddenly echoed from the cage. Addy recognized the sound all too well, and an ominous feeling immediately washed over him. The injured man let out a horrific scream, kicked his legs, and lunged at the nearest laborer. Everyone instantly realized what was happening. The man had turned into a zombie, but in the confined space of the cage, there was no room to escape. Fortunately, the guards outside heard the commotion and rushed to break open the cage. They thought they had neutralized the zombie, but little did they know, the crowd of escaping workers included several infected individuals. As the infection spread like wildfire, the number of zombies quickly multiplied, and no one could predict when their friends might turn into one of them. The previously captured infected workers, having escaped the cage, turned the entire logging camp into a hellish nightmare. Addy thought he was doomed. The danger here was far worse than yesterday, and he wondered if he would even survive this time. Meanwhile, Maya had no idea that her brother was in grave danger. She was still puzzled as to why the repairwoman hadn't come to work. Wasn't she supposed to help the workers demand fair treatment today? Her impatient colleague believed the repairwoman had chickened out and led a group to confront the supervisor. Just yesterday, even the mayor's son had promised to pay the full wages, but what they got was barely half of what was owed. Now the supervisor was taking a hard line, telling the workers that if they weren't happy, they could leave, because there were plenty of cheap laborers outside. This tactic hit the workers where it hurt. Maya didn't want everyone to lose their jobs, so she suggested they wait for the repairwoman to return before making any decisions. The supervisor had managed to suppress the workers' anger for the moment, but he couldn't control the situation for long. The mayor's son was eager to prove himself to his father, especially since the mayor kept urging him to take better control of the factory. The son was fired up and immediately headed for the factory. He had originally planned to calm everyone down, but the workers had long seen through him and knew he was just another mouthpiece. The anger that had been simmering finally exploded, and one worker, accidentally shoved, fell headfirst into the rapidly spinning blades. The blood spattered everywhere, forcing everyone to pause. The poor worker didn't even make it to the hospital. He died on the spot. Meanwhile, the mayor's son was still boasting in front of the reporters, claiming that worker safety was their top priority and that this incident was entirely caused by a few troublemakers. Maya couldn't stand his disgusting words anymore and stormed over to beat him up. But once she calmed down, Maya regretted it. Raisin had clearly warned her that the mayor's son was planning to sue her for assault. Violence wasn't the solution. Gathering evidence through legal means was the way to go. At that moment, Raisin mysteriously pulled out a camera. He had already gathered evidence of the mayor's crimes. Through two deceased workers' red wristbands, Raisin had deduced that the rehabilitation center run by the mayor was likely involved. He had visited the site under the guise of an interview, but the staff there tried to chase him off. However, after a few well-placed bribes, the staff immediately turned into professional tour guides. Raisin subtly steered the conversation toward the wristbands. The staff explained that the blue wristband indicated a mental patient and the yellow one indicated a homeless person. When he asked about the red wristbands, the staff member grew serious and insisted that there were no red wristbands at the center. As Raisin walked down a hallway, the staff member hurriedly tried to stop him, saying it was a restricted area. His curiosity piqued. Raisin pretended to have a stomachache and slipped into the restroom. Once the staff member left, he snuck out and easily avoided the guards. He finally saw what was at the other end of the hallway: two young men wearing red wristbands being forcibly shoved into a vehicle. Just as he finished taking a photo, he was caught by the returning staff member. Fortunately, Raisin had an unusual background, so no one dared to do anything to him. Soon after, the mayor's personal bodyguard arrived. He had already investigated Raisin's history and found that he had worked for 12 different media outlets in 4 years, each one firing him for various reasons. Raisin quickly added that he had exposed a corrupt mayor and sent him to prison. The new mayor knew Raisin was trouble and he couldn't get rid of him. Instead, he offered a thick stack of cash and asked Raisin for a one-on-one interview. Once the interview was over, Raisin was to leave town immediately. Given the circumstances, Raisin reluctantly agreed to the interview but made it clear that he wouldn't take any money. After leaving the rehabilitation center, Raisin ran into Maya at the hospital. He suspected that Maya's brother had likely been taken by the rehabilitation center. To avoid alarming anyone, Raisin decided to continue his investigation, hoping to uncover more secrets. The mayor's son, feeling embarrassed after being publicly humiliated, took out his anger on his incompetent men, slapping one of them across the face. He walked over to the tied-up repairwoman, blaming her for causing trouble and making his mayor father criticize him for failing to manage even a simple factory. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a bottle and ended the woman's life, deciding that anyone who didn't listen to him deserved to die. That night, just after Maya had said goodbye to Raisin, 2 police officers showed up at her door. It was obvious that the mayor's son's revenge had begun. All the workers involved in the protest had been rounded up and thrown in jail. In this town, the mayor and his son had complete control, and everyone knew their fate would be bleak. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, Raisin sneaked into the rehabilitation center. He carefully slipped through that mysterious hallway and from a distance saw a group of young people wearing red wristbands being forced onto a truck. Police officers were even involved. Raisin quickly pulled out his phone to gather evidence. As the truck started moving, he hopped on his electric scooter and tailed it. Before he knew it, they were winding up a mountain road. Suddenly, a car appeared ahead. Afraid of being spotted, Raisin swerved into the woods along the roadside. He watched the truck drive straight up the mountain road toward the peak. Playing it safe, he decided not to follow any further and waited until dawn. No other vehicles passed by during the night. At daybreak, Raisin hopped back on his scooter and continued up the road. It wasn't long before he reached a logging camp at the mountain's summit. Raisin's instincts kicked in the moment he stepped inside. Something was seriously wrong. The people there were acting like rabid animals, attacking anyone they saw without warning. Raisin quickly pocketed his phone and scrambled to escape. Just as one of the crazed attackers lunged at him, a figure suddenly rushed in and took it down. Raisin's eyes widened. He called out Addie's name. He had seen Addie's photo on Maya's phone. Addie barely had time for introductions. He grabbed Raisin and pulled him out of the camp. They weren't the only ones trying to escape. Some workers had already figured out that the safest hiding place was the sewer tunnels beneath the camp. Zombies wouldn't follow them there. Addie and Raisin managed to slip away and hide. After catching his breath, Raisin suddenly remembered his scooter, which was still parked at the camp entrance. Addie told him to forget about it. Hearing that his sister Maya was worried sick about his disappearance, Addie was desperate to get back to town. By the time they reached the main road, it was already morning. They spotted an abandoned car up ahead with bloodstains smeared across the hood, but no sign of anyone inside. Raisin climbed into the driver's seat and found the keys still in the ignition, but the engine wouldn't start. Suddenly, 2 zombies appeared in the distance and began sprinting toward them. Addie panicked, yelling at Raisin to start the car. When the engine refused to turn over, Addie grabbed a camera tripod and charged at the zombies, managing to stab one through sheer luck. Just then, the car roared to life. Raisin instinctively hit the gas, mowing down the second zombie. He froze for a moment, horrified that he had just killed someone. Addie rolled his eyes, saying that it's a zombie, not a person. Realizing his mistake, Raisin reversed and ran over the body again for good measure. By evening, they arrived at the village halfway down the mountain. Planning to stay the night, they unwittingly stumbled into a nest of zombies. Eyes shut and hearts pounding, they ran blindly through the village's twisting alleys until they found a small house and barricaded themselves inside. But the zombies were too strong. They smashed through the door. Just as things were looking hopeless, a figure suddenly appeared. A blade flashed in the air, and the zombies were swiftly cut down. Their mysterious savior was a petite young woman. Addie was stunned. When he asked for her name, she replied she was Ella. She had learned swordsmanship from her grandmother, which explained her impressive skills. But even with Ella's talent, the situation was dire. The village was crawling with zombies, and their phones were getting no signal. Ella had already been stuck there for a whole day. Addie grew anxious. He had to get back to Maya. Ella, blunt as ever, shrugged that for all he knew, his sister might have already turned into a zombie. The next morning, Raisin woke up to the sound of Addie slapping him awake. That slap seemed to spark an idea. Raisin suddenly had a plan to escape the village. He suggested wrapping their vulnerable body parts in cardboard as protection. With Ella's sword skills and their combined strength, they had a good shot at breaking through the zombie horde. Addie even fashioned Ella a makeshift long blade. The trio crept out of the house and soon came face to face with a zombie. Ella reacted instantly, driving her blade through its throat, but the sound attracted more zombies. Without hesitation, Ella charged into the fray, cutting them down one by one. Meanwhile, Raisin dashed toward the car, only to realize the keys were missing. Panic set in as more zombies flooded the street. In desperation, Raisin found a battered tricycle. It sputtered and stalled as he tried to start it, buying Addie and Ella precious seconds to fight off the swarm. Addie grabbed a wooden ladder and used it to block the advancing zombies, while Ella struck them down from behind. Finally, the tricycle roared to life. Addie and Ella jumped on, and they sped off down the road. Just when it seemed they were in the clear, Addie discovered the tricycle's basket was loaded with durians. Before he could even react, a group of zombies appeared ahead. Raisin braced himself to ram through them, but suddenly more zombies poured out from the courtyard behind them. With no other options, Addie began hurling durians at the zombies. To their surprise, the pungent odor confused the zombies, causing them to stagger and spin around in disarray. Taking advantage of the distraction, Raisin floored it and plowed through the remaining zombies. Addie let out a victorious yell. They were finally heading back to the town and met his sister. But little did he know that the town was on the brink of total collapse. At the moment, Maya was still thinking about how to get out of the police station when, unexpectedly, the cell door swung open. A big shot wanted to see her. Curious, Maya followed the officer into an office and was surprised to find the deputy mayor sitting there with a broad smile. The deputy mayor had always been overshadowed by the mayor's powerful presence, often treated as invisible. But after seeing the video of Maya punching the mayor's son, she offered to help her overthrow the mayor's regime. Maya had no interest in getting involved in political games until the deputy mayor casually mentioned that she had located her missing brother. Moments later, all the workers involved in the protest were released from custody, and Maya was escorted to the deputy mayor's private villa. Though she usually kept a low profile, the deputy mayor was well aware of the mayor's crimes. She discovered that Maya's brother had been sent to work at the lumber camp. Rescuing him was possible, but only if Maya agreed to lead the fight against the mayor. Desperate to see her brother again, Maya agreed to the deal, though she insisted she didn't want to drag her fellow workers into it. The deputy mayor seemed prepared for this hesitation. She pulled up a video on her phone. It's footage of the body of the repair woman brutally killed. Maya's eyes instantly filled with tears. The deputy mayor pressed her advantage, saying, "If they don't fight back now, they won't know who's next." After returning to the workers, Maya shared the video. Outraged, everyone agreed it was time to bring down the mayor and his son to avenge their fallen comrade. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that they were becoming pawns in the deputy mayor's political game. Her suspicions were confirmed when the mayor's son learned that Maya and the others had been released. Furious, he immediately started planning his revenge. That evening, Maya sensed someone following her. She knew it had to be the mayor's henchman. Rushing home, she locked the front door and slipped out the back, only to find the area swarming with guards. Just when she thought she was out of options, the deputy mayor's bodyguard appeared and whisked her to safety. After this close call, Maya realized that even if she chose to stay out of the conflict, the mayor and his son would never leave them alone. Determined, they began contacting other factories in town. The other workers, who had suffered under the mayor's oppressive rule for years, were more than willing to join the uprising. Coincidentally, the mayor was set to host an important guest that day, a high-ranking figure from his political party. Securing this person's favor would determine whether the mayor could win a coveted seat in parliament. To ensure a successful meeting, the mayor spared no expense, offering not only large sums of money, but also a slice of his lumber business. The political guest seemed pleased with the gesture, but the deputy mayor had an informant. Every detail of the meeting was relayed to her in real time. Without wasting a moment, she ordered Maya and the others to act, and so a massive protest erupted. The town's streets were flooded with furious workers, quickly forming into a tidal wave of rage. When they reached the restaurant where the mayor was hosting his guest, the guards quickly formed a blockade at the entrance. From a balcony above, the deputy mayor watched with a satisfied smile, as if everything was going exactly according to plan. Inside the restaurant, the mayor's bodyguard hurried to lock down all doors and windows. The political guest, confused by the commotion, demanded to know what was happening. The mayor, seething, screamed at his son for not controlling the factory workers, roaring like a goose that if he weren't his son, he would already be dead. Outside, tensions reached a breaking point. Maya demanded that the mayor come out and apologize to the workers. The security captain refused. At first, both sides seemed to be holding back until someone threw a rock. That was the spark. Chaos erupted as the crowd and the guards clashed. The police arrived soon after, but instead of calming the situation, they sided with the mayor, escalating the violence. Amid the chaos, a guard from the lumber camp collapsed to the ground, clutching his leg. He began to convulse violently, then his eyes snapped open, blood red. A guttural growl escaped his lips as he lunged at the nearest person. Most people were too busy fighting to notice, but when the infected man bit into someone's neck and that person rose moments later, also blood-eyed and snarling, panic spread like wildfire. More people were attacked. More rose as the infected, until the town square became a war zone of screaming and biting. Maya was horrified to see her fellow workers torn apart in front of her eyes, but she had no time to grieve. She could only run. Inside the restaurant, the mayor's team also realized something was terribly wrong. The mayor and his entourage slipped out the back door. One of the guests' bodyguards was bitten and dragged into a car. The mayor's son, panicked, shoved him out of the vehicle. The deputy mayor saw it all. A sinister smile spread across her face. She didn't report the outbreak. Instead, she went straight to the party's leadership with the story that the mayor had caused the death of a high-ranking official. Meanwhile, Maya was still running. All around her, the infected swarmed the streets, tearing through anyone unlucky enough to be nearby, and all she could do was keep running. At that moment, Addie and his two companions drove into town. Seeing the panicked townspeople fleeing in all directions, they sensed that something was terribly wrong. After asking around, they learned that zombies had appeared near the restaurant. Addie quickly jumped into the driver's seat and signaled for Raisin to keep driving. Meanwhile, Maya was desperately trying to escape. Just as she thought she might get away, a zombie tackled her sexy body to the ground, attempting to have a zombie baby with her. Struggling to her stinky feet, she shoved it into the middle of the street, just as a car came speeding down the road and sent the zombie flying like a Barbie toy. The car screeched to a stop. It was Addie and his crew. Noticing that the zombie was still twitching, Ella calmly stepped forward and finished it off with a precise stab. Maya finally reunited with her long-lost younger brother. At first, she tried to put on the tough big sister act, but tears streamed down her greasy face. Raisin quickly reminded them not to get sentimental. They needed to find a safe place to hide. Ella hesitated for a moment before announcing that she was leaving to find her grandmother. Addie thought it over for a second, then ran after her. Maya rolled her eyes in disbelief, thinking that it's only been a few days, and that girl already has her brother wrapped around her finger. The deputy mayor was riding high on her success. Even the military and police had now fallen under her control. Her plan was to lock down the town, cut off all communication with the outside world, and seize control of the situation. When the military commander reported that the zombie virus was spreading rapidly and suggested deploying troops, the deputy mayor dropped the act entirely. She ordered the police to round up the mayor and his son at all costs. As long as she secured her position at the top, she could blame any casualties on the mayor later. It seems that this woman was even more ruthless than the previous mayor. The mayor and his group had already retreated to a secluded villa on the outskirts of town. He hadn't anticipated how quickly the zombie virus would spiral out of control. Meanwhile, the party boss, still unaware of the full extent of the disaster, was furiously blaming the mayor for the death of his underling. Shocked by the number of casualties in the streets, the boss decided to call for military backup. The mayor's heart sank. If this got out, his political career would be over. The boss chuckled coldly, stopping him from thinking of having a shot at that congressional seat. The mayor's son grabbed a nearby ornament and bashed the boss over the head, then turned to the boss's secretary and took her out too. The mayor patted his son on the shoulder, his cold gaze betraying no emotion. It was clear the father and son were on the same page now. At that moment, the security captain detail arrived with bad news. The police had issued a warrant for the mayor and his son. The mayor knew they couldn't stay there any longer. He ordered his men to gather as many weapons as possible. Surviving this disaster meant not only escaping the zombies, but also avoiding the deputy mayor's purge. As they drove through the desolate streets, surrounded by hordes of ravenous zombies, fear gripped them all. Suddenly, the car screeched to a halt. The road out of town was completely blocked. The mayor stared at the wreckage in disbelief. In less than half a day, the entire town had fallen. The zombie outbreak swept through the town like wildfire. Within seconds of being bitten, people would transform into bloodthirsty monsters. Unfortunately, the police still didn't grasp the severity of the situation and were too busy rounding up troublemakers. They locked up both the injured and the unharmed survivors alike. The moment the cell doors clicked shut, one of the injured prisoners began to convulse violently before leaping at the person next to him. Chaos erupted in the holding area. A guard, hearing the commotion, instinctively unlocked the cell, only to be immediately tackled by a zombie. The other inmates screamed as their smelly parts were torn apart. Within minutes, the town's only police station was completely overrun. The hospital fared no better. Patients rose from their beds and attacked doctors and visitors alike. The same horrifying scene unfolded all over town. Maya and Raisin had thought about calling for help, but the deputy mayor had already cut off the town's communications. As they turned the corner of a street, they came face to face with a zombie feasting on a hapless victim. Without a second thought, they sprinted in the opposite direction. But more zombies were closing in fast. Ahead, they spotted a chain-link fence. Using every ounce of strength, they scrambled over it just as the horde reached them. Following a series of winding back streets, they eventually stumbled upon a supermarket with its doors tightly shut. Through the glass, they could see a group of survivors inside. Raisin banged on the door frantically as the zombies closed in. Just when it seemed too late, someone inside finally opened the door. Starving and exhausted, Maya and Raisin quickly wolfed down whatever food they could find. Before they even had time to catch their breath, the rumble of an approaching vehicle made them tense up. Maya grabbed a knife and peered out the window. It was the mayor and his group who had failed to escape the town. Meanwhile, Addie and Ella had driven their beat-up car through swarms of zombies, finally arriving at Ella's grandmother's estate. Crimson bloodstains smeared the walls. Ella's heart sank as she banged on the heavy front door. A few zombies staggered toward them from the distance. Just as panic was setting in, the door creaked open. Ella's grandmother stood in the doorway, calm and composed. Without a word, she raised a wooden staff and swept it across the ground. When the dust settled, the zombies lay motionless at her feet. Ella rushed into her grandmother's arms, sobbing as memories of her mother's death overwhelmed her. Addie stepped back, giving them space. Trying to distract himself, he wandered through the house and examined the framed photographs on the walls. Fencing trophies, martial arts medals, piano recitals. Ella's grandmother had been a master of it all. After a while, Addie turned to glance back at Ella and accidentally caught her changing clothes. He froze at the sight. Ella's grandmother suddenly appeared behind him, her knowing gaze sharp and piercing. Addie awkwardly scratched the floor with his foot. The old woman smiled faintly. She had seen through him immediately. Once Ella was dressed, her grandmother pulled Addie aside and whispered for him to take good care of Ella. She lost her father when she was young, and now her mother is gone too. She just wants Ella to live a peaceful life. For the first time, the steel in the old woman's eyes softened. When no one else was looking, she wiped away a single tear. Before they knew it, night had fallen. Addie was suddenly shaken awake by the grandma, who pointed outside. There was a horde of zombies gathering at the door. The fragile wooden door wouldn't hold for long. She suggested they leave immediately. In front of the shrine in the main hall lay a sharp longsword. She handed it to Ella for self-defense. Addie pulled out a grenade, but the grandma snatched it away, saying he was better off with a wooden stick. Just as the three of them were preparing to escape through the back door, the front door suddenly gave way under the pressure of the zombies. The grandma shoved them both out of the room and locked the door from the inside. She turned to face the oncoming horde, drawing her curved sword without a trace of fear. Then she charged into the fray, but there were too many zombies. Her strength quickly waned as she was surrounded. Knowing she wouldn't survive, she pulled out the grenade. Outside, Ella was desperately pounding on the door when two zombies suddenly lunged at them from behind. Addie and Ella managed to take them down together. Addie urged Ella to run. They couldn't waste the grandma's sacrifice. Just as they were about to drive away, the sound of the grenade's explosion echoed through the night. Ella broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Addie tried to calm her, saying they couldn't let her grandma's death be in vain. Then he started the car and drove toward the town. On the road, Addie tried to distract Ella with small talk, but as he spoke, his own voice began to tremble and tears welled up in his eyes. Ella, confused, was about to ask what was wrong when a horde of zombies suddenly appeared ahead. Ella shouted, "It's time for revenge!" They fought their way through the horde, but just as they were catching their breath, even more zombies came charging toward them. This time, they were truly panicking. Just as the zombies closed in, heavy rain suddenly began to pour from the sky. To their surprise, the moment the rain touched the zombies, they froze like statues. Without hesitation, the two of them rushed in and began cutting down the immobilized zombies with ease. For the first time in a long while, they smiled at each other, the weight of the grandma's loss lifting ever so slightly. Addie restarted his beat-up little tricycle and said it was time to reunite with his sister. But at that very moment, Maya was facing an unprecedented crisis at the supermarket. She had just run into her nemesis, the mayor and his son. The mayor pulled out a handgun and ordered the survivors inside to open the doors. Maya wanted to resist, but the others were too scared to refuse. Once the mayor and his son were inside, they wore smug expressions that made Maya's blood boil. She demanded to know why the mayor had taken her brother to the lumber yard. The mayor lied, claiming he had never kidnapped anyone. Raisin stepped in to mediate, saying that now wasn't the time for infighting, especially since the supermarket belonged to the mayor's family. The mayor nodded and suggested they work together. Maya was about to lash out when an emergency broadcast from the deputy mayor interrupted her. The broadcast declared Maya, the mayor, and his son as wanted fugitives, accusing them of causing the zombie outbreak. Maya was furious. After using her as a scapegoat, the deputy mayor was now throwing her under the bus. The mayor, however, remained calm. He told Maya that they had been betrayed by the same person. Knowing they couldn't stay there long, he ordered his men to gather supplies. Maya confronted the mayor if he was really behind the zombie virus. The mayor shook his head innocently, claiming to know even less than she did. Raisin believed him since he had witnessed the outbreak firsthand. The mayor's men had been completely unprepared for the virus, suggesting it wasn't his doing. Raisin advised that their priority should be gathering supplies and finding a safe place to hide. Two of the mayor's men headed toward the restroom and were about to open the wooden door when the cashier screamed for them to stop, but it was too late. Several zombies burst out from behind the door, pouncing on the two men and tearing them apart. The cashier fled, cursing them for opening the emergency exit. No one knew how many zombies were lurking on the other side. Chaos erupted as zombies poured into the supermarket. The survivors scattered, desperately searching for places to hide. But the supermarket wasn't that big, and one by one, the survivors were overwhelmed. Maya and the others were experienced by now. If the zombies didn't come in large numbers, they could handle them. But a mother and her child hiding in the corner weren't so lucky. When they were spotted by a zombie, Maya rushed to help but got caught in the struggle. Raisin leapt in to help, but another zombie was right behind him, attempting to charge at him and have a zombie baby with him. Just when it seemed hopeless, the mayor finally stepped in, firing several precise shots to clear the area. His other men joined the fight, and soon all the zombies were taken care of. But by then, it was too late. The other survivors who had sought refuge in the supermarket were all dead. Maya collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the brutality of the outbreak. And then, the sound of police sirens filled the air. The mayor and his men quickly turned off the lights and ducked into hiding. As wanted fugitives, they knew the deputy mayor wouldn't show them any mercy. The police cautiously approached, guns drawn, and shot out the tires of the mayor's car. 2 officers carefully stepped inside the supermarket, only to be ambushed and taken down by the mayor's guards. Realizing that more reinforcements would soon arrive, the mayor decided to escape immediately. Maya hesitated, unwilling to run, but with the police after her as well, she had no choice. Clenching her teeth, she followed the mayor and his men out through the emergency exit into the dark night. Maya knew the town like the back of her hand. The workers' dormitory wasn't far and was tucked away in a remote spot. It should be relatively safe. The mayor was quietly planning to follow Maya when a few zombies suddenly lunged out from the shadows. One of his men was taken down, and his son hesitated for a second before getting grabbed by another zombie. The mayor swiftly took them down with precise shots, but he was done pretending. He raised his gun at Maya, forcing her to lead the way. Before long, they reached the workers' dormitory without further incident. Most of the workers had been protesting when the outbreak began, so aside from a young night guard, the place was deserted. Maya had to put down her former co-worker herself. It left a bitter taste in her heart. But the worst blow came for the mayor. His son had been bitten during the earlier scuffle. Based on their experience so far, the mayor's son would inevitably turn within a day. Now the mayor faced a cruel choice. Would he put the greater good above his own blood, or would his love for his only son cloud his judgment? The zombie virus had swept through the entire town. Desperate refugees swarmed toward the government building, the only supposed safe zone, only to be met by cold iron gates. Their screams of terror mixed with the gruesome sounds of flesh being torn apart as the zombies closed in. Those lucky enough to have already made it inside watched in horror as every survivor outside had been turned in a few minutes. Meanwhile, the deputy mayor sat comfortably. A bodyguard leaned in and suggested they evacuate the town immediately. But the deputy mayor's obsession with power was almost pathological. She believed that if she could capture the mayor, she could finally take full control of the town. Just then, a subordinate rushed in with a report. 2 soldiers had discovered that zombies seemed to have an extreme sensitivity to the smell of durian. A few high-ranking officials hurried to confirm this and found that when a durian was held close to a zombie, the creature would recoil as if it had seen a ghost. The deputy mayor's eyes lit up. She called the satellite phone to report the outbreak, conveniently blaming the entire incident on the fugitive mayor. Before hanging up, she made sure to take credit for locking down the town and discovering a potential solution to the zombie problem. Afterward, she ordered her men to focus on 2 things: capturing the mayor and gathering as many durians as possible. But it wasn't long before her men reported that the situation outside was too chaotic to collect durians on a large scale. After a brief pause, the deputy mayor walked over to the group of refugees she'd taken in. The crowd erupted in anger, demanding to know why she wasn't helping the civilians still trapped outside. The deputy mayor had already prepared her response. With tears in her eyes, she claimed that opening the gates would have doomed everyone inside. Her emotional speech calmed the crowd. Then she shifted gears, announcing that she had discovered a way to defeat the zombies. For the sake of rebuilding their broken town, she needed everyone's cooperation. And if anyone spotted the mayor, they were to report it immediately. Unaware of this, the mayor and his group were still hiding out in the dormitory. While it was secure for now, it was only a matter of time before someone found them. The mayor decided they needed to head toward a radio station on the far side of the forest. He hoped to use the radio to contact military friends outside the town and call for a rescue. Maya hesitated. The thought of leaving her brother behind made her blood boil. The world had changed too quickly. How had she ended up teaming up with the very man responsible for so much suffering? Meanwhile, Raisin worried about getting infected himself. He had so many dreams left unrealized, traveling to the seaside, starting a family with someone he loved. He stole a glance at Maya as he spoke, only to find that she had already drifted off to sleep. Elsewhere, Addie and Ella had reached the town center, but Addie's beloved 3-wheeler had finally broken down for good. He stroked the vehicle mournfully until Ella, unable to bear it, dragged him away. Addie knew his sister well and guessed that she was likely hiding at the workers' dormitory. Ella quietly envied Addie for having a sister to lean on. She had always been alone in this world. Addie wanted to say she had him, but the words stuck in his throat. Early the next morning, the mayor's group packed up their supplies and prepared to move out. Maya announced that she wasn't going with them. Their route would take them through too many zombie-infested areas. The mayor merely nodded. Once the group left the dormitory, Maya finally explained her reason for staying. She was waiting for her brother. Raisin didn't argue. Instead, he handed her a pen and paper and calmly reminded her that even if she and her brother reunited, surviving the zombie horde and the deputy mayor's hunt was another story entirely. As expected, the mayor's group quickly ran into trouble. Every few steps, they were swarmed by groups of zombies. They could handle them for now, but bullets were in short supply. The mayor ordered his men to switch to melee weapons. Swords and axes meant closer combat, raising the stakes significantly. Just as things were starting to spiral out of control, Maya and Raisin arrived to back them up. Maya had finally made peace with herself. She had decided to leave the town with the mayor. With Maya leading the way, the group could avoid some of the more dangerous areas. Meanwhile, Addie and Ella arrived at the dormitory only to find it completely empty. Addie's heart sank. Then he spotted a mark on the map, a sign left by Maya. It was Raisin's idea, a way to help the siblings reunite without losing track of the mayor's group, their only lifeline. Addie muttered complaints about his sister while leading Ella toward the radio station. Without Maya's guidance, they naturally stumbled into zombie territory. It didn't take long before they were caught in the middle of a terrifying zombie wave. The two of them sprinted for their lives, scaling a metal fence just in time to shake off their pursuers. Ella still wanted to kill them all through the iron gate, but Addie quickly intervened. The two turned and headed around to the back of the factory, but after only a few steps, they heard a noise coming from a stack of cardboard boxes. Addie swung a wooden stick wildly, and to their surprise, a man jumped out. Ella froze for a moment, then furiously shouted. It was the driver who had abandoned the car and fled earlier. If it hadn't been for him, Ella's mother might still be alive. With that thought, she pulled out her sword, vowing to kill the driver. Addie tried to stop her, but the driver was too busy begging for mercy to notice the zombies charging toward him. Watching him scream in agony, Ella felt a mixture of emotions, but her complex feelings were interrupted by the shrill screams of zombies rushing in from both ends of the street. With no way to escape, they could only retreat into a nearby room. There, they found piles of durian shells blocking the zombies' path. Deciding to wait out the night, they settled in for the time being. Ella had been running for a while and was drenched in sweat. The girls in the city loved their baths, and Ella wasn't about to break that tradition even in the zombie apocalypse. However, when she walked into the bathroom, she found that the door lock was broken. She shot a cautious glance at Addie before reluctantly closing the door. Meanwhile, Addie, who was focused on finding food, reached into a cupboard and, to his shock, grabbed a rat. He jumped back in fright, landing in the naked bathroom. Ella slapped him in the face. Addie covered his face, looking like an upset wife. Ella, both exasperated and amused, couldn't help but laugh her saliva off. Having this man around during the apocalypse wasn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, the mayor and his group were close to their destination. Raisin noticed the mayor's son's pale face and grew wary, but when he tried to get information from him, the mayor stepped in and shut him down. Before long, they arrived at a small village. The villagers recoiled in fear upon seeing them, as news of the mayor's wanted status had already spread. They angrily accused him of being the creator of the zombies. The mayor, unfazed, prepared to speak, but suddenly a few zombies came running from behind. With a fierce shout, the mayor raised his axe and slaughtered the zombies. His ruthless side intimidated the villagers, who reluctantly opened the gate, allowing them to pass through. The group didn't encounter any more zombies and soon arrived at the broadcast station. Upon entering a dusty room that appeared to have been abandoned for a long time, the mayor ordered everyone to check the area for safety. Maya found a walkie-talkie in a cabinet. As a former mechanic, she easily handled it. Raisin watched in awe, calling her the zombie hunter who excels in repairs. Maya smiled, while Raisin, taken by her charm, was lost in thought. Meanwhile, the mayor was growing more worried as the zombie wound on his son's leg was worsening. The mayor hadn't hidden the truth from his bodyguard. He comforted the mayor's son, saying they just needed to hold out for a few more hours, and once the rescue team arrived, they'd find a way to treat the zombie virus. The mayor's son, feeling betrayed, stormed into another room. Maya and Raisin stood there confused until they saw the mayor's son's leg wound. Raisin understood and silently grabbed a pair of scissors. Perhaps triggered by the situation, the virus inside the mayor's son flared up. His eyes rolled back, and when he stood again, he had turned into a mindless zombie. Though Maya and Raisin were prepared, the room was small and without proper weapons, so they were quickly overwhelmed. It was only when the mayor and the others broke down the door that they managed to escape. A guard, the last to arrive, was bitten by a zombie before he could react. The group quickly restrained the mayor's son, locking him in the adjacent studio. The captain was in tears, as the man bitten was his younger brother. The mayor pulled out his pistol and gave the injured man a quick death. He regretted not being more open about his son's condition, thinking that perhaps this tragedy could have been avoided. With a heavy heart, he apologized to his son through the glass before slowly raising the pistol. The muffled gunshot echoed through the room. The old man's frustration grew as he hammered the table. It wasn't until Maya and Raisin entered that the mayor regained composure and signaled them to begin adjusting the radio. For Maya, this wasn't difficult. The mayor took the microphone and finally made contact with his friend, a colonel from the provincial army. However, when he asked for a helicopter to evacuate the town, his friend informed him that it was impossible. The deputy mayor had taken full control of the town and rejected all aid. Still, the mayor wasn't empty-handed. From his conversation with the colonel, he learned that all the town's entrances and exits were sealed off except for one, an old bridge from World War II which had been overlooked. This bridge became their only hope for escape. Maya knew of a tunnel that would shorten their journey, so after leaving a signal for her brother, she led the group to depart under the cover of night. But as they entered the woods, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps. A large horde of zombies came rushing toward them. The group drew their weapons, firing while running. The last security guard, a step slower, was instantly surrounded by zombies. Soon after, he was consumed entirely, including his smelly part. Luckily, the mayor's group managed to make it into the tunnel, but when they tried to close the door, they discovered the hinges were completely rusted. Elsewhere, a zombie was dragged out of an iron cage, and the residents on the scene were terrified. The deputy mayor, however, stood calmly and motioned for her men to open the cage. The frantic zombie charged forward, but was quickly restrained by ropes, unable to advance. The moment that followed would become a miracle for the onlookers. The deputy mayor took out a piece of red cloth, and the zombie seemed momentarily confused. As the cloth moved, the zombie started to back away, eventually retreating back into the cage. The deputy mayor turned around with confidence, explaining that zombies were afraid of anything red. She encouraged the residents to gather as much red cloth as possible, promising that the military would escort them out of the town. The crowd erupted in applause, unaware that the red cloth had been smeared with durian. The true reason the zombies backed off was because of the foul odor. The young officer was puzzled, not understanding why the deputy mayor had lied. The deputy mayor laughed her saliva off, saying he was still too naive. However, in public, she didn't explain the situation. Privately, she had already reached an agreement with several high-ranking officials. The town was now overrun with zombies, and all exits were sealed. The only way out was a war-era bridge. Before attempting to escape, the deputy mayor had a big plan. She intended to lure all the zombies into one spot, using the limited explosives they had to not only kill the zombies, but also destroy the bridge, cutting off the only escape route. The high-ranking officials shuddered at the thought. Meanwhile, inside a house, Addie suddenly woke up, surprised by how carefree his sleeping position had been. No wonder he'd had such vivid wet dreams all night, especially the moment when he saw Ella toss her hair. His mouth went dry again. He quickly ran to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. To relieve his embarrassment, he turned on the TV just in time to catch a live broadcast from the deputy mayor. She was using the same trick again, calling on residents to find red cloth, claiming the military would escort them out of town. Adi immediately saw through the mayor's lie and realized staying here was too dangerous. He needed to meet up with his sister as soon as possible. As the two of them walked down the street, they saw soldiers going door to door. Adi had a bad feeling, and his suspicions were confirmed when he spotted two survivors waving red cloth in an attempt to drive away zombies. Before he could stop them, the survivors were quickly overtaken. Gunshots rang out in the distance, and not only did the zombies fall, but the survivors were also silenced by the military. Adi's heart sank as he grasped the harsh reality. The two of them gathered their courage and fled, now not only having to dodge zombies, but also avoiding the soldiers patrolling the streets. At that moment, Adi noticed an electric bike approaching, but was distracted when he saw several men beating up residents. His anger flared when he recognized one of them. It was the same officer who had once forced him to go into the mountains to chop wood. Ella sighed, not believing he could really take all three of them on. Adi suddenly understood, grabbing Ella's hand and pulling her to run. With the luck of the protagonists on their side, they quickly encountered a group of zombies. They dodged to the side, leaving the three officers confused in the wind. Soon, cries of agony echoed from the alley. As they looked up, they saw a gated yard ahead and dashed in without hesitation. While assessing the situation, a figure suddenly appeared behind them. Thankfully, it was just a false alarm. The homeowner greeted them kind-hearted, explaining that they were welcome to stay as long as they liked. However, she mentioned that she might need to go out for a bit. Adi didn't think much of it, but when the homeowner mentioned red cloth, he nearly choked. After asking further, they learned that the homeowner intended to gather red cloth to join other residents. Adi realized everyone had been deceived, so he revealed everything he knew. Afterward, they decided to split up, with the homeowner going to the gathering spot to inform others of the truth. Addie and Ella set off for the broadcast station. If they found a way to escape, they would leave a signal for others to follow. It wasn't long before they pushed open the door to the station and found fresh corpses on the floor. Addie recognized them as the mayor's men and confirmed that his sister had been here. They searched the broadcast room and eventually found a recording left by Maya, learning that the bridge was the only way out of town. Just as they stepped outside, Ella froze. A zombie appeared ahead, and she instantly recognized it as the one responsible for her mother's death. Addie also knew the zombie. It was the first infected person, the one who had used the unknown flower. Ella, filled with rage, wanted to avenge her mother, but the zombie lunged at her before she could act. Addie swung his wooden stick to help, but when the zombie attacked again, the two of them instinctively dodged. Unfortunately, they crashed into a guardrail, revealing a horde of zombies behind it. With no time to start the electric bike, they turned and fled, not daring to look back. Meanwhile, the mayor and his group were also being chased by a horde of zombies scrambling to escape. They barely managed to make it into a tunnel, but the iron gate was rusted shut. Just as the bodyguard prepared to sacrifice himself to hold off the zombies, something unexpected happened. The zombies all froze in place, as if something terrifying was lurking inside the tunnel. The group, puzzled, cautiously moved forward, soon catching a whiff of a putrid stench. Raisin realized that zombies were highly resistant to durian, and he quickly deduced the cause. Any foul odor could block the zombies' senses. Everyone suddenly understood why the zombies hadn't followed them into the tunnel. But the question remained, where was this unbearable stench coming from? Carefully, the group continued forward, unaware of a few shadowy figures emerging behind them. As they reached an open space, they heard the sound of something gnawing from a nearby hole. The bodyguard fired a warning shot, telling whoever was hiding to show themselves. Moments later, the sound of metal clanging echoed from multiple holes as figures emerged. Their clothes were even more ragged than the zombies. It was clear they'd been living here for quite some time. To everyone's surprise, one of them called out the mayor's name. The mayor, stunned, wondered if even wild men knew his name. One of the men, chewing on a bone, revealed the truth. They were workers who had escaped from a logging camp in the mountains. When the zombie outbreak began, they hid in the sewers, which connected to this tunnel. The workers hadn't dared to venture out for days, surviving by scavenging animal carcasses. No wonder the tunnel smelled so foul. As they realized who had brought them here, the workers' eyes burned with murderous intent. Finally, they had found the ones responsible, the mayor. Maya tried to explain that her brother had also been taken by the mayor, but times had changed, and they were only passing through. The workers didn't care for excuses, slowly closing in to surround them. Seeing the situation turning dangerous, the bodyguard acted first. Raisin pulled Maya aside, intending to let the mayor and bodyguard face the growing number of enemies while they made their escape. However, two of the workers, oblivious to the plan, broke away from the group and chased after them. Raisin wasn't much of a fighter, but his determination to protect Maya was unwavering. He held off the attackers long enough for her to escape. Maya kicked the workers down hard, drawing the enemy's attention, and the two of them raced toward a cave, one running, one chasing. Inside the cave, Maya swiftly took down the worker with a scissor kick. Raisin didn't have a weapon, but he fought fiercely and managed to turn the tables on his attacker. After overcoming the danger, he quickly found Maya. Both of them had sustained some injuries, but nothing serious. Unfortunately, the mayor was not so fortunate. While he'd managed to kill a few enemies, both he and the bodyguard had lost their pistols, and they were forced into hand-to-hand combat. The bodyguard, strong and imposing, suppressed the attackers while also protecting the mayor. The mayor took the opportunity to grab a pistol, but it quickly ran out of bullets, allowing the workers to pick up another weapon. The bodyguard swiftly subdued the new threat and urged the mayor to escape. The mayor hesitated for a moment, then heard the bodyguard's blood-curdling scream. He didn't turn back to help, but instead continued forward. Soon he encountered Raisin and Maya, who were taking a brief rest. Back at the supermarket, the mayor had been surrounded by capable people. Now, it seemed like he was the only one left. The mayor couldn't help but feel a bit of regret. Raisin tried to comfort the mayor, telling him that his bodyguard was tough and wouldn't die so easily. The three of them continued walking and finally made it through the tunnel. Maya pointed ahead toward the bridge that led out of the town, not far in the distance. Suddenly, a horrible stench hit them. A rotten dead cat was lying beneath their feet. They covered their running noses and pressed forward, but before they could relax, their steps faltered. They hadn't expected the path ahead to be filled with zombies. Meanwhile, in the government building, the deputy mayor received a report support from her men. All the explosives were ready, and the plan to lure the zombies was proceeding as planned. The bodyguard raised a concern, asking why they didn't just abandon the mayor and evacuate earlier, avoiding all this chaos. The deputy mayor shook her head, reprimanding the bodyguard for not understanding how much she hated the mayor. It turned out that many years ago, in a corruption case, the mayor had used the deputy's only brother as a scapegoat to protect himself. That was when the deputy swore that the mayor would suffer for the rest of his life. On the other hand, Maya was still confused, wondering why there were so many zombies gathered in such a remote area. Raisin recalled the dead cat at the tunnel entrance and thought they might be able to use it to pass through the zombie horde. The mayor agreed, realizing they didn't have much time left. The next moment, the three of them, holding the dead cat and covering their noses, slowly made their way into the horde. This tactic seemed to work, as the stench blocked the zombies' senses. But soon, they tripped on a corpse. The dead cat slipped from their hands, losing its odor protection. The zombies immediately noticed them. On the other side, Ella and the others never expected that behind the tin shed, a vast horde of zombies would be waiting for them. No matter how strong they were, all they could do now was run for their lives. To make matters worse, the area was so remote that there was nowhere to hide. As they looked back at the zombies chasing them, Ella steeled herself. If it came down to it, she'd fight them head on. Just then, a truck sped towards them. It was the previous homeowner coming for help. Using durian, they managed to push the zombies back, giving the group a chance to escape the chase. Meanwhile, Maya and the others alert the zombies to their presence. Panicking, they scrambled to grab the cat corpse. Although the zombies didn't immediately attack, they couldn't move forward and were forced to return to the previous cave. Just as they thought they were safe, they heard faint footsteps inside the cave. Tension filled the air as they anxiously stared at the entrance. To their relief, they saw some familiar faces. It was Addie and Ella, having arrived to join them. The mayor was overjoyed to see that his bodyguard, who had stayed behind to cover their retreat, was still alive, and even brought a group of residents who had figured out the deputy mayor's plot. As the group took a moment to rest, they discussed how to get through the zombie horde ahead. After all, escaping the town was within reach, and no one was willing to give up now. Addie mentioned something from the other day. He had noticed that whenever it rained, the zombies would freeze in place. Raisin speculated that it was similar to how strong odors blocked the zombies' senses. But with clear skies above, rain wasn't in the forecast anytime soon. Maya suddenly had an idea. Not far from there was a rainmaker who lived in a village. Whenever there was a drought, the villagers would ask her to bring rain. The mayor was almost speechless, since they really believe in such nonsense. But to his surprise, the residents all agreed, saying that the rainmaker was incredibly powerful. The mayor had no better ideas, so he reluctantly allowed them to try. Addie and Ella took on the task of finding the rainmaker. Maya warned them to return immediately if things went wrong. The mayor wasn't very hopeful, but agreed to wait only 1 hour. If they didn't return by then, they would have to force their way through the zombies. At the same time, the deputy mayor was already preparing to escape. She was rallying the few remaining survivors, telling them that red cloth could protect them from the zombies. In reality, she was planning to use them as bait to ensure her own escape. The only bridge out of the town had already been reached by the soldiers. They had planted all the remaining explosives on the bridge, and as soon as the mayor arrived, they would blow it up. Watching the deputy mayor board the bus alone, the military commander's face darkened. Thanks to the widespread propaganda, many residents who had been hiding in their homes were now on the streets. Wrapped in red cloth, they seemed almost invincible, walking confidently toward their destination. A few fortunate residents encountered the deputy mayor on the road. They had hoped for a ride, but the deputy mayor, desperate to flee, ordered the driver to speed past them, leaving the military commander even more frustrated. Meanwhile, Addie and Ella had already left the mountains. As they neared the village where the rainmaker lived, Addie, worried about unforeseen dangers, wanted to confess his hormone feelings before they reached their destination. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he couldn't bring himself to speak. Ella seemed to sense something and quickly changed the subject to cover it up. The two of them soon arrived at the village halfway up the mountain, relieved to find no zombies in sight. Addie approached a wooden house and knocked hesitantly. Unfortunately, the person who opened the door wasn't the rainmaker, it was her daughter. After asking around, they learned that the old rainmaker had passed away a month ago. However, the young woman had inherited her mother's skills. Ella couldn't quite believe it, but with no better options, they decided to take a chance. They gathered the necessary items for the rain ritual, and the three of them went outside to find an open space. Addie and Ella stood guard while the young rainmaker began to draw a circle on the ground and perform the ritual. As time passed, Addie and Ella grew exhausted, but there was still no sign of rain. On the other side of the mountain, the mayor was growing impatient. Seeing that the hour had passed, he decided that the rain request had failed and made up his mind to charge through the zombie horde. Maya wanted to wait a bit longer, but the surviving residents sided with the mayor. With a command from the mayor, they sneaked up to the edge of the horde. It seemed he was preparing to fight through it. At the same time, the brainwashed residents in the town encountered a large group of zombies. Without thinking, they charged straight into the horde. As soon as they made contact, the residents realized something was wrong. Despite being wrapped in red cloth, the zombies remained vicious, and many residents were slaughtered in confusion. On the other side, Addie and Ella were also attacked by zombies. With no way to retreat, they drew their weapons and fought back. The young Rainmaker was frantic. Perhaps from overexertion, she collapsed to the ground. But just then, a miracle occurred. The clear sky suddenly darkened, and within moments, torrential rain began to pour down. All the zombies froze in place, motionless. After a brief moment of shock, the residents snapped back to their senses and began taking action, venting the pent-up frustration they had accumulated over the days. After clearing the zombies, Addie and Ella were reluctant to say goodbye to the young Rainmaker, but she thoughtfully gave them an electric scooter for the road. Meanwhile, the deputy mayor, speeding down the road, encountered more survivors. Upon hearing them call her a fraud, she ordered her soldiers to mow them down. The military commander, now unable to tolerate her actions, pulled out his pistol and shouted at the deputy mayor. The next moment, he was shot down by the bald bodyguard. The deputy mayor calmly reassured the remaining officers, telling them they could either follow her to escape the town or die at gunpoint. On the other side, the mayor and his group had reached the edge of the bridge. Spotting soldiers guarding the area ahead, their faces tightened. Although they outnumbered the soldiers, they were no match for their superior equipment. However, the mayor remained unshaken. After all, he had a military background and was well versed in commanding troops. Before long, smoke rose from the trees near the bridge, and the captain ordered one of his soldiers to investigate. As expected, the soldier fell into a trap set by the mayor. When the captain received no response, he sent 2 more soldiers, who met the same fate and stepped right into the ambush. Everything had gone exactly as the mayor had predicted. The bridge-guarding captain was now left without any soldiers, while Addie and Ella, on their way to the bridge, unexpectedly ran into an old acquaintance, the first-generation zombie that had killed Ella's mother. Ella's gaze hardened as she vowed to turn it into a true corpse. Even though zombies emerged behind them, Ella didn't look back. She charged at the first-generation zombie. Addie fought off the attacking zombies to create a safe space for Ella's duel. In the end, Ella lived up to expectations, delivering a fierce strike and avenging her mother. Meanwhile, the mayor and his group approached the bridge-guarding captain, who tried to resist but was shot down in an instant. Yet the captain wasn't entirely dead. He pulled a grenade from his pocket, threatening to blow the bridge and take everyone with him. Raisin said he should not risk it since they were all just working for the government, and it would be better to stay alive and enjoy life. The man was persuaded and tossed the grenade into the river. However, before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, a barrage of bullets suddenly rained down from behind. The deputy mayor had arrived, flanked by a well-equipped group of soldiers. Maya and the others were no match for them, and the mayor wisely ordered his group to lay down their weapons. The deputy mayor's expression twisted with anger as she yelled at the mayor, savoring his downfall. Just as she was about to give the order to kill them, the sound of an electric scooter horn echoed from the bridge. It was Addie and Ella, but to their surprise, they were followed by a massive horde of zombies. The deputy mayor had to abandon her desire for revenge. She left a few soldiers behind to hold off the zombies and fled across the bridge, not even looking back. The mayor instructed Maya to chase after the deputy mayor. She might blow the bridge at any moment, while he stayed behind to buy time for the residents to escape. Several soldiers formed a human barricade, fiercely fighting off the zombies, but the numbers kept increasing, and the soldiers were quickly overwhelmed. Raisin grabbed Addie and Ella and pulled them back. The bodyguards advised the mayor to leave, but he stayed behind, guns in hand, fighting valiantly until his ammo ran out. This time, the bodyguard knew there was no turning back. Meanwhile, the deputy mayor had reached the other side of the bridge. She ordered the captain to detonate the bridge, but he insisted on waiting for everyone to cross first. The bald bodyguard shot him dead. The deputy mayor quickly advanced, pulling the detonator from the dead body. Seeing this, the mayor and his group, now in full flight, shouted for her to wait. For a moment, she hesitated, but ultimately, she pressed the button. With a deafening explosion, the bridge split in two, halting the zombie pursuit. When the smoke cleared, Maya sat up from the ground, surprised to see that Addie and the others had also made it across the broken bridge and were safe. At that moment, a group of soldiers appeared from the distance. The deputy mayor's face lit up with joy, and she ordered them to arrest the mayor and the others. However, the soldiers ignored her commands and instead surrounded her and her bodyguard. It turned out that the soldiers were led by the mayor's military friend, and now the deputy mayor would face the full force of the law. The scene shifts, and Maya and the other survivors are taken in at a temporary camp. On the television, a news report about the mayor's recognition is playing. It praises his bravery in saving the residents, fighting off zombies, and even losing his only son in the process. However, Maya and the others aren't paying attention to any of this. The four of them, paired off into two groups, are lost in their own moments of relief, grateful to have survived the ordeal. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.